Environmental Services. I'm in the Drinking Water Groundwater Bureau under the Hydrology and Conservation section as the Community Well Siting Manager. Before we get into the agenda tonight, what I want to do is thank the Town of Kensington for providing a place to hold this public hearing. And then I want to acknowledge any local town officer, and if they are here, if you'd like to please stand up and state your name. And then I'd like to acknowledge any legislator or representative here. If you'd like to also stand and say your name.
Susan Percelli, representing Rockingham District 19, Hampton Falls, and Kensington.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. So the agenda for this evening is to first go over the large groundwater withdrawal permit procedures, which I'll be presenting, and then a presentation on the proposed well siting project, which will be completed by Henry Garrett, Groundwater Investigation and Division of GPA. After those, we'll have an informal Q&A session, then we'll take a quick break, we'll set up the oral testimony phase of it, and then we will begin the oral testimony, in which then you'll be provided the ability to speak in front of the microphone and ask your comments. We'll have cue cards in the back for you to be able to provide your name and information to let us know that we can communicate your name properly and then bring you up here for the oral portion of it. So, types of groundwater withdrawals that are regulated by the state of New Hampshire are withdrawals for small and large community well systems, withdrawals for bottled water, as well as withdrawals greater than 600,000 gallons per day, which would be equivalent to 40 gallons per minute from a well or wells installed after July 1998. Types of groundwater withdrawals that are not regulated by the state are all withdrawals from non-potable uses established before August 1998, withdrawals from non-potable uses that are less than 57,600 gallons per day, domestic wells with withdrawals less than 57,600 gallons per day. Statutes and administrative rules applicable to this application is RSA 45-C, Groundwater Protection Act, RSA 485, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and those can be found at the www.genport.state.nh.us. Rule sets that we will be working with are EMP WQ 403, the large groundwater withdrawal permit withdrawals, EMP DW 302, large production wells and wells for large community water systems, along with EMP WQ 2101, water conservation. Then on the other half of things, it will be EMP DW 503, Public Water Systems General Operating Requirements. 504, Public Water Systems Maintenance Requirements. 404, Design Standards for Large Groundwater Withdrawal Systems, and those could all be found at nhdes.nh.gov. Rules and regulations, administrative rules. If you do a quick search online, you'll be able to come up to this page very easily, and then you can push in the administrative codes that are there. Statutory definition of a large groundwater withdrawal is any withdrawal from groundwater of 57,600 gallons or more of water in any 24-hour period at a single property or place of business, except withdrawals associated with short-term use. Permit requirements in RSA 45C-21 apply to withdrawals from wells sited after July 31st, 1998. Summary of groundwater withdrawal permits in New Hampshire. Permits issued to date are 47. Of those, 5 bottled water facilities, 1 withdrawal is active, 2 permits have expired since their inception. We have 4 golf courses, 3 withdrawals that are active, 1 permit that had expired, and 38 public water systems, and 32 of which are currently active withdrawals. Permit applications currently in our queue and pending are 8, all of which are public water supplies. So the active large groundwater withdrawal permit locations are on this layover of New Hampshire, and as you can see, there's some in the most in the seacoast, and then as you go up north, there's few. For the large groundwater withdrawal permit production volume, they're all in gallons per day. As you can see, we have the max currently, or total, is 7.2 million gallons per day, which kind of exceeds this graph, so we'll think of it up here. And then we have them descending all the way down to 68,000 gallons per day. The current proposed production volume for Exeter kind of falls right in this area here. Of those, we have golf courses, community wells, bottled water, and then the Exeter proposed, as you can see, more on the smaller side for the other systems. For more information, if you have questions, comments, or you want to become more well-versed in them, you can go to our website, nhdes.gov, and then if you go onto the large groundwater withdrawal portion of the website, you'll be able to click on a couple of these different links. The fact sheet is actually back there that I provided, and then you have permit application notification forms, large groundwater withdrawal permit summary table, which is this here at the bottom, in which you're able to click on some of the links, identify the actual permit, what the permit has within it, if there's monitoring, and what the PWS, public water supply system link, and then water levels if we have them. Milestone steps in this permitting process. So 2020, 2022, we had test well drilling programs. January 2023, the preliminary application was submitted to the Department of Environmental Services. In February 2023, we had the first public notification hearing that occurred here. Within 45 days of that, we had the comment period closed, and then Nhdes technical review and comments, which occurred between 4/23 and 3/24. So April to March, essentially, the following year, in which we had comment letters, and then we had responses to those comments. In November 2024, Exeter completed their withdrawal test, and now we're in the final report stage of things where Member Garrett provided us a report on behalf of Exeter on June 16, 2025, and then in July is when we're having this current meeting, public hearing. From then, we'll have another technical review. If we have comments, we'll be reaching out and submitting, or issuing letters for comments. And then once those comments are addressed, we will be able to then review it again. So timeline for public input, 15-day period for municipalities and community well systems within the potential impacted area to request public hearing following the submittal of the preliminary and final report. So the 15-day deadline was 7/1/2025. Public hearing was requested on 6/24/2025 by the town of Kensington. The public hearing, if requested, is held within 30 days of request. 30 days of the deadline was 7/24/2024. Public hearing was scheduled for today, the 23rd. 45-day written comment period follows the close of the public hearing. So if you don't complete closure of the public hearing tonight, we have a continuation. evaluation, it will not start that 45-day comment period until after that point. Components of the final report: detailed description of analysis of all observations and measures collected during the pumping test, an assessment of potential impacts of the withdrawal on water users and natural resources relative to the adverse impact criteria and statute. Proposal for long-term monitoring, reporting, and mitigation programs as necessary. Approval of a water conservation plan, which we have not received yet. Revision of wellhead protection area and development of wellhead protection program, and assessment of needs for drinking water treatment based on the results from the water quality sample. Large groundwater withdrawal, RSA 45-C or 21, statute requires relative to adverse impacts. Per RSA 45C, 21-V-C, no large groundwater withdrawal shall cause an unmitigated adverse impact. Other water supply wells, private, public, and commercial, surface water, streams and river impacts, wetland impacts, impacts caused by the spreading of groundwater contamination, surface water and groundwater discharge compliance impacts, and groundwater availability impacts. So, our contact information for large groundwater withdrawal permit, I wanted to put it up here, is largegw@des.nh.gov. You can submit your written comments there within the 45 days. Tentatively, the 45 days would expire on September 7, 2025. If you want to mail it, you can mail it to the address below to the intention of large groundwater withdrawal permits. My contact information is Vera Twantek at 603-271-7019, and then Steve Roy, who's also sitting up here with me, who's the section manager, is 603-271-0660. You can submit any emails that you want to us pertaining to the permit, comment period, and that's all I have. Are there any questions regarding the process of the application at this time? Yes?
Will that be available, will your presentation be available to us?
Yes, I believe they'll be providing it on the website. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you'll have that.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes.
When you were showing where Exeter's proposal fell on that graph.
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
I couldn't read that number. Could you please tell us where it does fall?
Where it falls is 576,000 gallons per day. Yep. Yes.
So, with all this great amount of information that's gone on, I got one hard question. When do you expect that growth in trucks? With all the water going on?
So that will be
You have multiple sources, and you're flooding multiple places.
agreed.
You know, there's no control point on that, so.
Since that is going to deal with the topic that Emery Garrett will be presenting on, I'd rather table that for now and let them discuss it. Okay? Is that fine? Is there any other questions? Yes, pertaining to the procedure.
Just a general question.
Yep.
How many permitting processes that have gotten to this point in the process have you said no to?
I believe that's 12 from the history. Is that correct?
Yeah,
They-
like 7 to 12-ish. They're at different points in the permitting process, some very early off. Clearly, they were encountering limits on production that they couldn't overcome, so they pulled the permit. Or we said, these are limits you're not going to be able to overcome. But it's around 7 to 12 total of the number of applications we've got that they have.
All right. That's all the questions for the process. Then we'll turn it over to Emery Garrett.
who's a project manager, who's been involved in this project from day one. This is an interesting project because we're in the process of developing a drinking water supply well on Drinking Water Road, which is a little bit ironic since I don't know many roads named Drinkwater, but this happens to be the case here. We're going to walk you through the process of what we've done today, and I'm going to do this as quickly as I can, but be in a position where you can ask questions and I can address them as best I can.
Will you speak louder?
Yes.
Capital is it?
Can you hear me now? Okay. Just a little bit about everything here. We started in 1989. We were focused entirely on groundwater exploration, development, permitting. We performed over 3,000 groundwater development projects up and down each United States, but more than 300 in the state of New Hampshire. Most of them, or many of those projects that you've seen in that graph, are those projects that we've permitted over the last 35 years. We work up and down the East United States, so it's not just New Hampshire. And we've been recognized by both state, local, and federal agencies for the work that we've done over these years. Why are we developing additional water supply for Exeter? That's what we're going to be talking about briefly. Where do we conduct the groundwater investigation? How do we conduct it? Why have we selected the property we have for groundwater development? What did we discover, and what are the results of the production well drilling and testing? What was the yield, and what's the water quality? And the state's already discussed what the next steps are. We were retained by the town of Exeter to develop a new source of water, essentially to meet some of their expanding water needs, but to provide additional water supply resiliency, and to improve their ability to provide management during droughts. And with climate change that we've experienced, drought has been an issue, and so having multiple sources provides them greater opportunity to manage these systems. I'm going to take questions at the end. This is a multi-phase project. We have completed the first 5 phases. We're in the 6th phase, which is now the groundwater permit, the final permit, to be honest. Phase 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to briefly discuss as we go forward. So phase 1 is essentially, we were asked or tasked to look at the entire town. Where is the best place to develop a groundwater supply in the town of Exeter? And these areas, if you can see on the screen, these circled areas are those areas we have identified as potentially favorable for groundwater development based on geologic deposits, contaminant threats, proximity to infrastructure, and things of that sort. Once we identified those zones, we proceeded to go with geophysical surveys. That's we're looking above the ground in phase 1, phase 2, we're looking below the ground. And some people have asked me, well, how does an exploration geologist really operate? I will tell you the simplest thing you can remember: if you close your eyes and you took a needle and you poked your arm, you get a little blood, and that would be a capillary. If you knew what was below your skin, you'd know where to go to the veins and so forth. And that's what our expertise is focused on: finding those veins or arteries that produce higher volumes of water, while at the same time aren't impairing other people who are also using water. So phase 2 is we went through and did geophysical surveys in these zones, and the best tool that we use, one of them is electrical resistivity, where we send signals below the Earth's surface. We're able to model the subsurface deposits. Oftentimes, I just tell you, this is a field, but most of the time we're doing these surveys in these woods. The surveys look something like this on a map. You've got these straight lines that we're running these surveys on. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is determine what's below the Earth's surface. So this is the Earth's surface here. This is the bedrock surface. And everything in between is unconsolidated deposits. That's your sand, gravel, clay, silt, whatever it might be. In this case, we're looking at about 60 meters or about 180 feet. But the majority of our surveys that we're looking in this particular area is around 100 to 130 feet deep. That means the bedrock is about 130 feet. We also use seismic, and you can see in this seismic photo or this diagram, this is the unconsolidated deposits, this is the bedrock. We again go down to about 140 feet from the deposits that we're looking at. So very thick sequence of material. We look at the hydrogeologic setting, and once we came to the sense of understanding this is the area, this is this is property owned by the school, Exeter School Academy. They own more than that. They actually own here. They own the low into Kensington. It's a wooded area. As you can see, this is highly wooded and very pristine, no development, which is what we're looking for when we want to develop a new source of water. The geology is favorable. This is the blue here is the sand and gravel, which lies on top of about 80 feet of clay, and then again down the sand and gravel deposits.
Most people might see that as purple.
Oh, I'm purple.
He said blue, so
I'm colorblind. It's very unfortunate as a geologist. This is sand and gravel. This is clay. This clay drops roots down below that sand and gravel. These are quite a few wetlands in the area, so one of the things we have to evaluate is there's going to be any impact of pumping the water on wetlands. And then just to give you perspective on the boundaries of the towns, this is obviously the border of Kensington and then Hampton Falls, and this is Exeter. Just to take note, the Gilman well that serves Exeter is here, the stadium, and then the Larry Lane. This is the property that is owned by the Phillips Exeter Academy. And this, as you can see, it's very substantial. It makes up about 80%, 75 to 80% of the area that we had preliminarily identified as the zone of influence for this pumping well. So about 75% of the land that is in the contribution areas is owned by one property owner. Very rare, unusual, very favorable for the town of Exeter. Next phase was to go to test well drilling. Exploratory drilling, we've identified includes geophysics, where we want to go. We bring these drill rigs out on track machines. We drill down, and the hope is to find sand and gravel deposits in a thickness and capacity that would produce more. This is the amount of test well drilling that we did throughout Exeter. You can see these test borings are all throughout. But the most favorable area was down in this particular area within the Exeter property. The wells we drilled on the property itself are located here. Just to give you a sense, as you can think about these letters, because we're going to talk about them briefly. 1U, 8B, this is the production well site that we're looking at. I want you to look at the cross-section, essentially what we have. If you look from north to south, this is the, I'm going to say red, not green, red line. Red line down through this area. These are, the cross-section you're going to see is based on the well data that we collected in that specific area. This is the sand and gravel, so this is going from north to south. You'll see the stadium well is in fairly shallow deposits up in this area. This is the bedrock surface. The area that we're drilling for the new well is in this deeper section, which is more favorable, what we want. This is the sand and gravel that's on top. This is all clay on top of the next aquifer, which we call the Exeter aquifer, which comes down through here. This is the deposit that we're seeking to take withdrawal water from. If I look, when I go west to east, this is D to decline. You'll see that, again, we're going from shallow deposits. This is the clay. We pick up the sand and gravel, which is pretty thin at the Larry Lane site, all the way down into the areas that we're targeting for this new supply. So more favorable from the standpoint of yield and capacity. This is the installation of the 12-inch production well. That's what a screen looks like. We put in 8 feet of screen. This well is 120 feet deep. In that case, it goes in, as you see. weld the stainless steel casing, or the casing to the stainless steel screen, install it down into the aquifer, and then this is what the log looks like. You can see there's only 8 feet of screen that we've installed, but it's 120 feet deep. And this is all clay that we went through, as we predicted with the geophysical surveys and the test boards and so forth. The next part of this is then the testing of the yield and the quality. So we've gone quite a ways to get to the point of drilling a well. Now we're testing the long-term sustainable yield and quality and the impacts to local homeowners. That's the key. I want to point out this graph because people often ask us, when did you do the pumping test? This is a plot of precipitation. You can see this is the average precipitation that is measured, and the squiggly line up here is the actual precipitation for that year. You can see we did the pumping test in November at a time when precipitation was below average at that, so it was during a dry period, which is what we wanted to see. I'll show you that during the pumping test we didn't have any rainfall. It was kind of an ideal time in the fall. Prior to doing any pumping tests, this is the static water levels that we have measured. So this measures the elevation of the groundwater table as it exists prior to us doing our pumping test, right? And you can see that the groundwater naturally flows under static conditions to the north and northwest. This is everything's flowing in this direction. This direction, that direction, towards the steam and the inland wells, all the way up through in this region. Now we're talking about groundwater, not surface water. This is the pump test setup. This is the well head here. This is the pump coming out. This is our control valve. This is where we're doing water quality sampling. And as you can see, this is where we're pumping 120 hours. In this case, we're pumping 400 gallons a minute for 5 straight days on without being stopped. So then, as part of this, before we do the pump test, we select a number of monitoring wells. The monitoring wells we identified, we're going to monitor the Larry Lane, Canadian, and Newman wells, which are the production wells that go to serve Exeter. We have 2 irrigation wells that are serving Phillips Exeter Academy. We monitor 15 domestic wells, 2 existing monitoring wells on site, 5 exploratory wells, the wetlands, and then 4 surface well locations. Yes.
Great. Very nice picture of that complex and the waters. I have 2 questions for you. One, how long did you run that test? And secondly, what was the level of the aquifer drops because of that?
I'm going to show you.
Okay.
We ran the test for 5 straight days, 120 hours. And this is a pumping test plan that we put together. It's reviewed as part of the preliminary application with the state. The state reviews it, approves it, and we go back and forth with what needs to be done. I just want to show you just quickly that here's the stadium well again. This is the building well, Larry Lane, and the irrigation wells that we monitor. But also, I'll show you the monitoring locations that are down here. But the surface water, we monitor the surface water of Exeter River, this northern fire pond that's used by the town of Exeter. Jude's Pond, which is right here next to the production well. There's the production well, there's Jude's Pond there. And then the Kensington Fire Pond. We monitor the entire time during this period. This is a picture of the Kensington Fire Pond that we installed our probe in to monitor during that extended period. And we monitored this, most of these were monitored for about 30 days, 10 days prior during the pump test and 10 days after. That's about 15. This slide is a little complicated, but we sent out letters to 54 residents. Residents that have the opportunity to either say yes, no, or not respond. Those in blue are all those that did not respond to our letters, and I believe we sent them out twice. So we gave people multiple opportunities to respond. And then the green is the ones that said yes, and then the reds are those that said no. So we have a fairly good representation of the wells, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about, what a well, everybody who has a residential well knows. This is a good well. This is one that's reasonably easy to get into and monitor. But, a lot of times the wells that we're monitoring are not easy. This is a concrete encasement. We have to take the encasement out, get downside, get inside the well, put our probes in. This is a well that had no casing. This is a well that had a lot of debris at the top of it, and then we had to clean out. It's not uncommon for a domestic well to have spider webs and sometimes mouse nests. So, I hate to say it. And then some of these are in bunkers that we have to get down into and monitor. So they're not all simple necessarily. So then once we've got those selected, which ultimately we had 30 wells that we monitored during this pumping test, which is pretty substantial. We did our step test and we monitored various rates of pumping. This is 250, 300, 350, 400 gallons a minute. And we chose 400 gallons a minute. So to answer your question, the water table was 20 feet below grade when we started, which is expected. We dropped the water level after 5 days of pumping of less than 20 feet. 19 and a half feet. The water level dropped 19 and a half. Well, not before the testing. The testing started at 20 feet. During the pump test, we dropped it 19 feet. Yeah. And then shut it off and it recovered back, to what we expected. Now this data, we want to go through a little bit is I didn't show you the barometric, corrected data, but that's a minor detail in this process. We pumped out 2.8 million gallons of water during that 5-day pumping test. This is the kind of a max test that we're going after. We had 19 and a half feet of drawdown. We only used about 20% of the available drawdown that would be typically in a management system. We pump to within about 5 or 10 feet of the screener. The screener rolls down at about 110 feet.
It was not during a drought period also, right?
Or during a dry period. We were in a moderate drought at that time. So this is what I want to show you. This is kind of what we expect to see. This is one of the monitoring wells on site. You can see that we had about, next to the production well, about 19 feet of drawdown. And I want to show you the Jude's Pond. And this is being monitored essentially from October 1st, yeah. October 1st, 2024, all the way to the end of December. And you see the blue area is where we did the pumping. This color is before pumping, and this color is after pumping. You should know what color. The point of this is this line does not change on Jude's Pond. This is the fire pond at all. This is straight across, and of course we have impact on one of the monitoring wells next to the exploration well, which we expect. I want to show you, this is a precipitation plot. You can see minor precipitation, no precipitation whatsoever during the pumping test.
Question? You can go back last time? So, is there value in monitoring surface water levels in something like a pond? When you said immediately under the pond, there's X number, 60 feet potentially clad, which is impervious.
Yeah,
So, if you were down below the clad, holding out water, I would expect to see a change in the fill level of the surface water.
Right.
Because it's sitting in the clad.
Right, but that's
So
why.
why would you monitor?
Because the town wanted us to monitor the Kensington Fire Pond to make sure that there was no adverse impact that would cause them not to be able to use that pond in the future.
Okay.
So we're providing the technical data that says that pond is not impacted, which we expected pursuant to the clay being present. In fact, none of the surface water ponds were, not even the Jude's Pond, which is right next to it, right? So, but it's part of the record that has to be established for those, and this is going to be used for a long period of time. Someone's going to ask the question, what was the impact of Jude's Pond? That's what we have.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people aren't confused to see that there was no drop in surface pond water height,
Right.
and they're gonna believe that that means we're not depleting water going from.
Right, so we're gonna talk about the groundwater impacts, because that's one of the things, yes.
You gave us a recovery graph. Is this well going to pump all the time? Or is it going to, I mean,
No.
why is recovery making a difference?
Well, if the well didn't recover, then we would be mining water out of the system, and we would ultimately deplete everything. Right? We want to see a recovery, because that means recharge is moving into the system. That's how the wells will be sustainable. Every well we put online, for any public water system or other, has to be sustainable, otherwise there's no purpose to this process. So if that well didn't recover, we would see a decline in capacity.
Does that imply there's a cycle time?
Pardon?
Does that imply that there's a cycle time? We will run this well till Exeter meet?
So,
Steve, answer
yeah.
this question.
So the whole testing program, what Jamie's talking about, it was a continuous 24/7 for 5 solid days. That is built around the idea that we want them to demonstrate what an extreme condition of use might ever be. Most water systems, I would say all water systems in the state, they never operate their sources that way. They don't want, you can't run something 24/7 and never turn it off. What we design water systems in this state around, and what Jared had shown you for public water system design standards, they need to diversify sources. So the target is to not run a well more than 10 to 11 hours a day, total cumulative. Okay? So it'll turn on and off multiple times a day, almost like a private well at someone's home. It turns on in the morning because everybody's taking their showers. You go to school, you go to work, you come back, it turns on in the evening when everybody takes their showers. It doesn't operate all day long. Exeter, is meeting what we anticipate big water systems to meet. They need to diversify their sources and have multiple options for different times of the year for different operating conditions. And Exeter has 3 or 4 wells, surface water intake, so it's never the intent for any well to operate like this, other than during the testing process, which is required by our rules to be pumped continuously like this at a worst case scenario condition. So we can see if that well's going to recover or not, or if it's going to mine groundwater, and we won't be able to prove it. That's the way. And again, let's have Jamie finish the presentation first, and then we can come back to questions.
Well,
Okay.
there's a really question specific to this. How long was the recovery time? You mentioned that it did recover, and you see that on the graph, but how long did it take to recover?
Well, we'll measure it in the amount of time that we pump, so we, I don't know exactly the number, but it was within a reasonable amount of time, within the time of pumping. So 5-day pumping, we want to see full recovery or close to full recovery. One thing I do want to mention is, and I mentioned this before, is we work up and down the United States. New Hampshire has one of the most rigorous pumping test requirements. 5 days is a long time. If you go down to Virginia, it's 48 hours. If you go down to Georgia, the testing for municipal supply is 24 hours. That's it. So, and there's no requirement for off-site monitoring whatsoever. It's New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, some of the New England states are much more rigorous in asking for data to base a decision. You move further to the south, and there's less response. And I just want to point that out, that 5 days is a long time to pump a well continuously. This is the map of the wells around that we monitor, and I'm going to talk a little bit, but you'll see that this is the drawdown of the residential wells that we saw after the 5 days. And I'm going to show you a plot map, but this is what we're seeing around the pumping wells, around 20 feet. And then as you move further away, you go to like 1.78 feet here is what we saw after 5 days, and then down to 0.19 feet over the 5-day period. Very, very minor impacts on these particular wells. What I want to show you is that we do a plot for a straight line plot of the distance drawdown. So the distance away from the monitoring well to the pumping well is what we're trying to evaluate. So here is the straight line. This is the production well. These are the monitoring wells in the line. This was one of the wells in Exeter that we monitored, the Tuttle well that fell on the line. These are all the Kensington wells up here that fell off that line. They're not, in fact, these are, there's a full order of magnitude degree that they're not being impacted. In apart because of the separation of the clay, apart by the distance. But if they were being directly in line with the pumping of the production well, they would fall along the straight line as this line goes from 100 feet to 1,000 feet to 10,000 feet. It doesn't. So going to monitoring well near, I just want to kind of give you a sense. So here's, I'm going to walk through some plots for the wells that are in groundwater that was asked by the gentleman in white. What happens when we pump in the ground, and see what the impacts of the groundwater is. This is the well that is about, it's only 10 feet away or 9 feet away, and we had about 17 and a half feet drawdown, an interference drawdown with the well. So we're talking 9 feet away from the production well. Less drawdown than what we've experienced in the production. I move a little bit further away, 320 feet, I'm about 17 feet of drawdown. I go to 1,000 feet about, in this particular Tuttle now, this is the Tuttle well, that was the one that was most impacted, residential well in Exeter. Had about 13 feet or 14 feet of drawdown. I get to the barn domestic well, I'm just using these as examples. Steve mentioned when you pump your well, your residential well, you will see a drawdown associated with your own pumping. These drops in water levels are associated with the homeowner using their own well. And you can see that the wells are recovering, back and forth. We get a decline, a general decline because they're in a dry period, so the overall water table is dropping just generally as we speak. You can see here we had about 0.61 feet of drawdown after 5 days. And then we get down to the hog domestic well, down about 0.27. Hog uses their well frequently, as you can see, all the water use that they have. And then this is the pumping period, this is the pre-pumping, this is the post-pumping. Just gives you an idea that we're actively pursuing, understanding what is happening with the groundwater system that all of you are dependent on. Because there is no purpose in us developing well that's going to cause you to have adverse impact. We've done this for 35 years. We haven't developed or permitted a supply that's ever created an adverse impact, and we're not intending to do so in the future. Now, going to the surface water, this is Jude's Pond. We needed to provide a record to the school. Are we impacting Jude's Pond? Because Jude's Pond is something that they use. They recreate. No impact at all on that Jude's Pond. Look at this is the fire pond that I showed you before on a grown-up scale. This is the Exeter fire pond, no issues. And then the pond, this is the northern pond that Exeter uses as their fire pond. They wanted to know, is the pumping going to adversely impair their fire pond? And the answer is no. We compile, and I don't expect you to look at this data, but we compile a tremendous amount of information over the course of this pumping test. Pre-pumping, pumping, post-pumping, water quality. We put this together in a map that shows what we consider to be the zone of influence. So the red area, these are contours of drawdown. These are goes all the way down to less than a foot of drawdown. And this would be the area that would be impacted. Now, as I mentioned, 80% of this area is owned by the Exeter School. That's a pretty substantial amount in terms of the ownership. This is the wellhead protection that's been established for the area. In other words, we would consider this to be the wellhead protection area that we would want to, consider protecting over long term. Now, I know some of this property is, beyond their reaches. That's okay. Land use goes on, but we wouldn't want a landfill necessarily installed somewhere in, this region. Right? So that's just an opportunity for us to be able to manage potential and future contaminant flows. The water chemistry was really good. The end result is we have very low iron, very low manganese, we have elevated arsenic. Steve asked, Jared said at the beginning, one of the purposes of this test is to determine what the quality is, it's going to require treatment. This will require treatment for arsenic. But chlorides are low, sodium are low, hardness is moderate, nitrates are low. No PFAS, and you've probably read about PFAS issues, that's a big concern. No PFAS in this water, radiologicals are acceptable, So it's an outstanding, excellent source of water of high quality to be treated for us. So just to kind of wrap this up, and then you can ask questions. We pumped about 2.8 million gallons over a period of 120 hours at 400 gallons a minute. Pumping test was conducted in November during the extensive dry period that was occurring in southeastern New Hampshire. A total of 28 wells were monitored during the pumping test for a minimum of 7 days before the test, during the test, and a minimum of 10 days, but many of those went for much longer than that period. 15 of those wells were residential wells. 3 of those wells were existing production wells. Local wetlands were monitored using piezometers of the installed height by us and approved by Nhdes. The local wetlands were monitored, forest surface water locations were monitored prior to, during, and after the pumping test, including Judy's Pond, Kensington Park Pond, Mason Park Pond, and Jackson River. Groundwater monitoring drawdown data was extrapolated to 180 days of continuous pumping with no recharge to assess an actual potential impact. I want to explain that to you. We take the curves that we established during the monitoring period, extrapolate that for 180 days. Nobody's pumping 180 days, continuously without any recharge. That's how we come to determine what we expect to be the maximum impact. And then we assess that to say whether or not that could potentially interfere with your use. No impacts were identified in any of the residential wells located and monitored. No impacts were identified in any of the surface water ponds or soil pumping. No water quality. The water quality produced from drinking water well was excellent. We will be kept arsenic being elevated. And this well will serve as an excellent new source of drinking water that can safely provide 576,000 gallons a day in a manner that won't adversely, in our professional opinion, will not adversely impair any residential well within the zone of contribution, which is what we define as part of this test. So with that, I close and open it up to questions.
So yeah, for the agenda, this is sounds like Jamie's done. This can be the kind of informal question and answer session before the more formal kind of oral testimony where people who wants to can provide testimony to the record. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Well, we didn't have our well for about 40 years.
Yeah.
Never had trouble with it. If we were to have trouble with it after this, I think there might be some corollary, some causation. What will be done to make it better for us?
Okay. So were you monitored as part of the test? I don't know your address.
We were monitored. We also own part of the pond.
Yep. So, as was pointed out here, there are very minimal to no effects on many of the properties, the domestic wells that we're monitoring. So, we reviewed and read this application. We don't anticipate any effects. I want to start by saying that. In the world of large groundwater withdrawal permits, there are other large withdrawal permits in the state that do have a more substantive effect on water levels in private wells than this one. And in those instances, our rules enable us to tell the applicant they need to propose a long-term monitoring program of private wells that are believed to have a substantial influence that we want to keep an eye on. Okay. In addition, for those in an area that could be influenced, that we're not monitored, those applicants are told you got to send out letters to those homeowners, letting them know that that you are getting an approval for associated water supply well, and its influence area may include their property. If they feel they've encountered an effect that might be related to the source, then it gives them phone numbers at our office to call and contact, and it gives them phone numbers at the water system to contact if they believe they've been influenced by the well. And if they have, if we get a claim that someone says, hey, I think I'm influenced, things have changed, we will talk to them, and within 5 days, we make a determination whether or not that claim is valid. And if it is, if we believe it could be, we tell the applicant to propose to monitor that site to see if, in fact, a well is substantially responding that none of us anticipated would respond as a function of this.
So
So then what do you do?
So they monitor water levels, they collect that data, and they submit it to us based on a timeline we set. And we determine whether that triggers one of the definitions in state law related to adverse impacts or not, yes or no.
And then what do you do if it does have an adverse?
Okay, so if it does, then they have to submit to us what's called a source replacement program. That doesn't necessarily sound like, that makes it sound like it's an absolute replacement. It isn't. What has happened in other cases, and there's only been 3 of all the other permits we've ever issued, they assess that they collect data on the associated well. In the two instances that the water levels were affected, both of those instances were rectified by lowering the pump or deepening the well.
And who's
It's a
expense?
private.
Who's expense?
Oh no, it's at no capital cost to the well owner. It has to be entirely taken care of by the water system, by the permit board. In fact, that's actually in the statute and in the rules, that any source replacement that has to occur has to be taken care of, has to come at no capital cost to the well. Again, I want to emphasize, I see no potential for adverse impacts for any of these wells that we launch. Not in this, not in this testing program.
How long is that process you just described take?
So the way the rules are laid out, okay, they have to, if the individual is out of water, that the applicant has to provide, the permit holder has to provide water within 48 hours, that's drinking water. And then within 5 days, we need to determine what data we need to collect, and they need to collect it over the next 3 weeks, 21 days, at the end of which we make a determination of whether or not the claim is valid. And if it's valid, then either more data collection is done on like the depth of the pump in the well, how deep the well might be, what the yield of the well is, what the impact is, and then they need to develop a source replacement plan if we believe that that well meets the definition of an adverse impact criteria in state law. Again, I want to emphasize, none of the monitoring here points to me, makes me think at all that anybody would be adverse impact.
So it is possible that someone could be without water for 2 or 3 months or more?
No. Again, within 48 hours, they need to provide potable drinking water. And then within a 5 to 21 day period, we need to have enough data to determine whether or not they are impacted. If they're impacted, then an immediate plan is put together to get them water. Okay? And then a longer term plan is put in place to replace their source in kind at no capital cost to them by rule and statute. But again, I do not see the potential for adverse impacts in any of this data. Okay?
I understand what you're saying
Yes.
about that, but it may or may not turn out to be true.
True. Yes, ma'am.
Is that well down 120 feet, is that correct?
Say that again?
The impression is going to be down like 80 feet.
Is that, are you talking the production well?
The new well next to Food Pond
Okay.
The new well is down, yeah.
is
It's,
down 120?
yep, below the clay layer in the sandy gravel unit.
I was under the impression it was only going to go down 80 feet. Isn't that what you were told me again?
I don't recall that. Yes, ma'am. White.
What's the source of the recharge?
So you remember the blue halo, the wellhead protection area, big blob around the town area? Now that is generally inferred, that is developed to try to infer the area that could contribute recharge to this well. Ultimate source of recharge to any production well is precipitation and snow. There's a gentleman up here in blue, I'm sorry, I didn't let you do it.
Do you have any other applications pending in the same water table?
Yes, sir.
I'm Bob Paul, I'm the closest resident to the well in the town of Genesee.
Okay.
And my question first is, I was under the impression when we had our original meeting that each of the homeowners that agreed to get reports would get an individual report on our well. Was I incorrect with that?
Yeah.
No, you are not incorrect. You are correct to assume that had those been mailed out? Okay. They will be mailed out to you. Each and every person who's been monitored will get a letter from
Tomorrow.
with a plot. Are they in the mail?
Tomorrow.
So you'll get your own plot of the water level associated that was measured before, during, and after.
Along with that, on the graph that you had that showed the results in one particular well, is that speaking for the entire area, like just one well?
One month.
Okay, so my question is, were any of the property owners in the town of Kensington, was there PFAS found in any of those wells?
PFAS was not sampled in the domestic wells as part of this project. That's not a requirement. No, it's only sampled in the proposed production well.
So in that one particular well?
I would suggest anybody here who wants to have their private well sampled for PFAS, but that's not a requirement of the applicant to go out and sample. Right.
How about the results of the test that was done in my well? And I have a full explanation of what was found in my well.
Just bacteria.
It was just bacteria. So we require an applicant who's doing a test that incorporates monitoring water levels in private homeowner wells. They're required to sample bacteria well before they touch bacteria in their home water supply, before they touch your well, and then after they're done monitoring, so that they need to show us that their activities of touching the water in your private home, they didn't incorporate a bacteria issue in your well. And so we want to see clean bacteria before and a clean bacteria after that shows that they did not impart a problem.
So my report will show me what the drop down was in the recovery.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it will give you the bacteria results, the lab results for the bacteria samples collected.
Along with this, though, this is 5 days, and we're talking with estimates for 180 days. How about a year from now? How about 2 years from now? 5 years?
Yep. So any large groundwater withdrawal permit that we issue requires that the production wells that we approve be equipped with a monitoring device that'll measure its water levels in the production well in perpetuity, and they have to report those to us in an annual report. Some sites, we have the production well data delivered to us each quarter. Other sites, we just wait for the annual report and have it submitted. And all that data, I think Jared had shown you the website with a summary table of all large groundwater withdrawal permits. You can pull up that summary table and look at all the permits we've issued. And there's a column that you can click that says, show me all the monitoring data. You can look at the water level data in all the production wells that we've ever issued approvals for at all the sites across the state. And this one will be added to that, so you can look at the water levels at that time.
Along with that, that's going back to that specific well. How about, but I'm still 1,000 feet away from that well.
Yep.
And how can I live in the town of Kensington, how can we as neighbors in the town of Kensington know that those changes aren't affecting us, even though maybe at the well site, it might be fine, but 2 years from now, we might all of a sudden start seeing.
Well, the testing done here, again, was a continuous 5-day, 400-gallon per minute pumping test. Right. Again, that is probably the worst case scenario that this well will ever be used for continuous use at the highest rate. And so what was observed in your well is likely the maximum effect that your well will ever experience. Because the use of this well will not be for 400 gallons per minute every day for 5 days or for 10 days or whatever. It'll be on and off at generally lower rates, just like an individual homeowner. Yes, way back there in the window. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for all of the information. Earlier in the presentation, you just referenced that there is a lot of activity happening in our area, in the southern Rockingham County area. Many of your permits are in our area. And there are many development projects that just fall under the requirements for the large groundwater withdrawal. We've got 250 apartments going in Seabrook. Hampton Falls has an apartment complex project for over 40 apartments. I'm sure Kensington will start to develop its plan. So my question is, can you include a regional impact study or information about how all of these projects are going to impact this one common aquifer? You know, you're looking at this very myopically for that one particular area, but I and many of us are concerned about, with all of this development, what is the net impact? And if we need to add an administrative rule to add a regional impact study, that's something that I would like to pursue. So thank you.
Good. Any questions?
I mean, are we going to address the regional?
Well, I'm not, okay, so let's be clear, this particular meeting is about this withdrawal in the town of Exeter. What you're talking about is a regional water supply study. The state has done numerous regional water supply studies in different parts of the region, the seacoast in particular is one of them. A recent big seacoast regional water supply study was done that ultimately is delivering water and trying to interconnect big systems, so there's a lot of redundancy. As far as sources, all the water comes from the same aquifer, that actually is not an accurate statement. It's in the southeast region of the state. That's where about 74% of the population is in the southeast region of the state. So absolutely, there will be more water supply developed down in the southeast region of the state to feed the population. So
So if
I
there
think
is any regional, information, is that something that you could include for us? Or is it available on the state website?
there's been many seasonal regional water supply studies, again, particularly in this area of the state. I can probably send a few links to some in this area of the state. Part of those studies in the past, that's what was born from them, is the state's water conservation rules. So the town of Exeter has yet to submit a water conservation plan. It's a requirement when they go through this permitting process. We can't issue them approval for this source until they do. So does Seabrook, so does Aquarium, so does Portsmouth, so does all the big towns that develop large sources in this part of the state. In any part of the state, they have to develop and implement a system-wide water conservation plan. One of the only states in New England that requires that. So that was born from one of these regional studies. So there are elements in place that are functionally driven to support efficient water use in parts of the state that develop a lot of water to feed the higher density population. Regarding, approvals of condos and apartments, those are local approvals that are outside of the control of the agency or the state. So if the local entities want to continue to approve, and connect homes to water systems, and the water systems have to meet the design rules that say they have to have so much water on hand for such and such a population, and as that population increases, they have to develop these sources. They don't have a choice. Those are the design standards they need to meet. And so, I don't, if the issue is, hey, there's too much water because there's too many people, the too many people issue is a local issue. It's not approvals for connections are not associated with this program, this department, this agency. Yes.
There's another one, I'm sorry, I just want to ask if you could make the regional information
Sure.
available. I send it along with this presentation. I would definitely appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
So there's never any limit on how much, like Exeter can develop, for instance, even if they don't have water for their residents?
No, it doesn't. The way it works, most big municipal city water systems, they develop 20-year growth models to try to get a sense for how to plan over time. And this water, even though it's going to be available at some point in the near future, it's not necessarily going to be consumed at the maximum rate, maybe not even forever, but the water system is they're projecting out 20 years what the demand would be, what they need to put into capital improvements, what they need to strategically improve for infrastructure, and water supply is one of them. just like wastewater handling and sewerage is enough. All cities and towns do this. So this is just a planning for the future. But yeah, we don't administer individual connections. All we do is say, the design rules for large systems basically say they have to have enough available water to make the peak day, and they have to have enough available water if they were for some reason lose their largest source, they have to have enough in their other sources to meet their average day limit. And so water systems like this have everybody meter, they track water use very closely, like cities and towns do. Yes, up front? No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, can I ask a quick question? So figuring that if we're in a drought situation, all depends on the law, we all have private wells. And we're all probably tapping off of maybe the same aquifer. So when Exeter is withdrawing and we're in a drought,
So
Exeter
this
still
did
has withdrawn.
happen. This was when the pumping test occurred. The state was in
I'm not in that,
a severe drought.
I'm not in that 1,000 feet, so I'm not part of that 50 wells that you guys were monitoring. So my only thing is that I'm wondering that Exeter, if we're experiencing drought, Exeter is still going to pull as much water as they need to pull, which then reduces the aquifer, which reduces my well as a homeowner. So how do we monitor how much water Exeter is pulling out of that well?
Okay, so it's a good question. Because they're seeking this permit, they're also going to be required to register the water supply well with the state's water use registration and reporting program, which means they have to equip it and their other sources with a water meter to show exactly how much they're pulling out every day. And then they report those results on a quarterly basis to the state's water use reporting program, which is another website you can go to, download their data, and look at what they're using. And in that water use reporting program database is going to be the limit. If they were to get this approved, we put their production well limit inside that database. And if they report a number that's above it, basically, Jared, myself, the water use program manager, we get an automatic alert, basically.
All right, so 576 is max.
576 is the
that
max.
permit allows.
That the permit would allow. We haven't issued a permit.
Right.
Yeah, and that's monitored and reported. And the other water supply wells, if you ever want to look at them, Larry Lane, Stadium, and Gilman well, they're already registered reporting water users as well. You could look at the production rate from those to get a sense for their seasonality of use or their on-off use. That water use is a good indication of the extent of use.
Those triggers don't come into effect until they exceed the daily allotment of usage, which was 578.
The current proposed rate, yes, those triggers. Most water systems, though, track it themselves too. And the good design principle that water systems use is once they're using about 80% of their limit, they really got to figure out why. Or they diversify to another source, or they start saying, okay, we need to do a growth model, we're too fast, and we need to develop more sources. Lady, and I'll continue, sir. Sorry.
Yeah, I have two concerns. One, emphasis in fermenting the regional impact. I've heard tonight several times mentioned, the present situation, real-time information. But, with other towns in this area proposing wells in 5 years and 10 years, it really concerns me that the water is going to be cold and cold and cold. We've been here for years. There have been serious droughts. What happened last fall was not a drought. And we all know that climate change is having an impact as well. So the resource, I don't think that we can assume that what's available to us now is going to be available to us in 5 years or 10 years. So when Exeter's expanding needs. You know, Exeter wants to develop Epping Road. Exeter wants to bring in commercial, tax income, business tax income, because their costs are higher, their property taxes are higher there. So after the first meeting regarding this project, I asked somebody from America, I said, what is a small town like us supposed to do? We all have private wells. And he said, maybe Kensington should develop its own municipal water system. Which I found kind of unrealistic, not to mention disingenuous. I really think we have to look at these things more regionally. I'd like to know that Exeter is only going to be drawing down what it actually needs, not whatever it can produce.
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure what the question is. Normally water systems are on the hook to meet demand. Okay, if they were to pump all their sources at maximum rates, they would substantially overfill their tanks. They'd be coming out the vents on the top. I mean, basically, they wouldn't pump. They wouldn't do that. Well, there's no reason to pump more than what's being demanded at the time that's being demanded. Regarding the regional thing, I mean, you touched on a number of stuff. Regional growth and demand for resources is driven by, again, individual town development and their choices for land use regulation and approvals of site plans and subdivisions in their town and commercial growth. That's the way it is across the whole state. So this process is meant to observe the impacts associated with a proposed use of water supply and ensure that when it is used, even if it's pushed, if the use is really pushed, then within the area of potential influence, there is a notification capacity for anybody in that area to reach out if they feel they're impacted. I guess I'm not sure, what Kensington could do on its own, other than request these hearings to make sure it's aware of what's going on with this permitting process. I guess I'm not exactly sure.
Is there a red flag system in place on the well if the aquifer were to go down to dangerous levels?
Yeah, so again, not only do they have to record and report water use, they have to record the water level in the production well and report that to us. I mentioned that either quarterly, annually, and again, that will be available online to look at. We review those to make sure that the drawdown observed in the well isn't out of line with what they've tested. Once it moves past or below what they tested, then we start getting concerned because we have not seen that level of variability in that production well before something unanticipated has happened.
So do they shut it down if that's the case?
We can require them to modify operation of the well and reduce wells and figure out what's going on. So yes, our permit conditions allow us to change conditions on the fly. I'm going to go to the gentleman in the back first.
Just one quick question. Worst case scenario, the problem exists, my well goes dry. Is Exeter responsible for bringing water to my house?
Again, you have to follow the process where you say, hey, I've seen a change. We would have Exeter deliver them to us to deliver their data associated with this well, the most recent data to us. We reach out to you to see what you experienced and when, and we combine that information to determine whether or not you experienced something that their well shows made a change, potentially had changed in effect. And then we determine whether or not your claim would be valid and instruct them, if we felt it was, to go out and collect data from your well and provide you water in the meantime, to determine if, in fact, when their use varies, yours varies.
In the meantime, how is the house getting water?
Again, within 48 hours, you can deliver potable water. That's the requirement. Within about 5 days, we would determine what the issue is, and within a 5 to 3 week period, we'd get you water. They would have to determine how to get you heat water, or we would instruct them to back down on production move production to other sources, you would come back and they would have to figure out how to implement a response plan. Yes, sir, Brett. But again, I want to call out, again, I do not see a lot of potential for any adverse impacts in wells that were affected less than 2 or 3 feet. It just does not appear to me to be a concern at all.
Exeter's consultant called it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear in front of you.
I'm sorry?
Can you say that again?
Exeter's consultant called it the Exeter aquifer. And you said it's not just one big aquifer. Can you give us some sense of what's going on under the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it's aquifer names, you know, people, I look at this particular formation here as a river valley kind of deposit that's buried by a bunch of probably marine or shallow marine fine silts and clays that are within the Exeter River basin. That's what I see. As far as formally referring to it as a formal aquifer, I don't see that. Many river systems in New Hampshire are filled at some depth with some degree of big river systems, some degree of sands and gravels. And Exeter is a big enough river to have experienced that.
So that sand and gravel area, that varies quite a bit.
Yeah.
From what you showed in your seismic analysis for the bedrock.
Yeah, what he showed.
And then you had the sand and gravel layer, which is where the water actually is. Over the top of that is a clay layer, impervious, and that sand and gravel layer seemed to vary considerably across the 2 charts that were shown, which was the A, north to south, and B, which is east to west.
And one caveat I want to point out is groundwater doesn't only exist in that sand layer, okay? Remember when they started the test in the well, they got the well screened in that sand layer, it's 20 feet. But remember they had shallow wells too, little monitoring wells in the shallower soils. There's groundwater there too. There's a continuum of groundwater from relatively shallow all the way down to bedrock. And then in bedrock, many of your wells that are monitored are bedrock drill wells. They're not even screened in this. They're not wells that are screened in sands and gravels. So it's a continuum of groundwater. It's not just present in that one little sandwich of sand and gravel. Just so
Okay, but I'm still imagining flow rates could vary.
Oh, certainly.
The relationship
Absolutely.
from the ability through those soils.
Absolutely.
But depending on the thickness of that gravel sand layer, which is probably going to have some flow limit depending on how thick it is. So did you guys look at recovery rates in some of the other wells that also saw appreciable decline? You looked at the primary well was 19.5 feet in 5 days of pumping time and about a 6-day recovery. And then you pointed out that Tull's well also went down by about 65% at 13 or something feet. What was the recovery period on that well?
So the recovery, we look at the recovery of all the wells to make sure, and you'll see with the residential wells, the drawdown is pretty significant for each residential use, right? Keeps bouncing back. The same thing with pumping that we had. Now, the one thing that you don't see in those graphs is that there's a general decline in the water table because of the dry conditions. So there, if I was to look at it from the point of time over a month, you'd see just a general decline. So it's not necessarily going to recover to what it was at that moment because the decline of the water table is continuing on. We make corrections for that. But the response was very good in terms of the recovery for the residential use.
So I have the recovery period seems to correlate with the test time.
Correct.
So 5 days of testing was about 5
Well, in your wells, most of it, yes. I mean, we're measuring 0.27, I can't remember if it's the halls, we had 0.27 feet. It's hard to, that's so minor that, and it's the case with all of it. If we saw 20 feet of drawdown or 5 feet of drawdown, it would be a little, give you an exact answer. The response is the recoveries were very favorable across the board.
So my understanding from some myself I read is that the intention is to put this production well online. And you're going to pipe it over underneath the river, Exeter River, to the other pumping station. Larry Lane or something. And then Larry Lane goes offline for rehabilitation. So the demand would be that the current production well would be have demand on it and would also supplement what is Larry Lane is doing right now. So that we can expect that on-off cycle time to probably be a little bit longer than just on-off. But until they exceed 578,000 gallons a day, nobody gets an alert.
Sorry, I don't understand.
So, what's the period of time it takes to trigger the state to get an alert that they're over what their maximum, is it an amount of time? Is it, if I go over my 500,000 gallons one day, you get an alert, or if I do 2 days in a row, or 10 days in a row?
1 day. 1 day.
1 day.
Day exceeds the trigger.
And then the follow-up to that would be, you want to find out what's going to happen the next day.
Yes, the way the rules work for these permitted withdrawals is that they have to report to us their total volume they withdraw from the well each month, and then each month they would have to report to us the maximum withdrawal day and date. So it triggers both of them, connected to both of those values. Max day per month. Max day. Oh no, they have to record each and every day because they have to report to us the max day, the max use day per month. In addition to the cumulative total amount they pull out over the whole month.
Okay, but nothing really triggers until they're at that full withdrawal rate.
Yeah.
And they could run right under that, 470,000 gallons a day.
Yes.
24 hours, that would trigger it.
Sure.
And that would probably have an extended effect on the property if for some reason they were to withdraw.
But again, we also get their water level production well water levels reported to us, so we have both of those data streams to compare. If we see it not recovering, then that's when we would take action. Jared does all the reviews of all annual reports for all large groundwater withdrawals, and has this with him when he does all of them. Do a tie. So ladies first.
So this may be a question for Mr. Henry. When you were looking at the big picture in Exeter, Exeter has other wells as well. How old are the other wells? Was this particular well designed to pick up the need if other wells began to fail or need to be shut down?
Well, part of the strategy, of course, is to provide a resilience to the system should a well fail. Now, town's not planning on any well failing, but their wells are older, and so some of the wells are being replaced. That's one of the conversations we're having right now with one of the wells to be replaced in the near future, because it is old. It doesn't mean that it's old in the fact that, and you should be, this should help your confidence though. These wells have been pumping for 50 years, every day. And so, and they're pumping simultaneously with the Academy's irrigation wells and other wells that are present and not creating any adverse impact. But should a catastrophic event happen, yes, this well will help the town survive the catastrophic event. And that's part of the resilience piece of putting the new well in. And it's just smart, it's just being smart.
So how near capacity, full withdrawal capacity for this well be operating at soon?
Well, I don't know when you're going to be operating the well, probably a year away. I'm guessing a year away, at least a year away before they be operating. And as Steve has mentioned a number of times, it's going to be based on their operational plan. They may pump this for 4 hours a day, they may pump it up to 12 hours a day, but they're not going to be pumping it 24/7. Now, I want to try to reemphasize the conservative nature in what we do in projections. We've taken this data and extrapolated it out 180 days with no recharge, drought conditions, severe droughts, to estimate, to the best of our ability, what the drawdowns will be. And as Steve said, even under those extreme conditions, we're not seeing these kinds of adverse impacts. Your drawdown in residential, oftentimes, and I'm going to do a study here, oftentimes we see in residential developments, homeowners impacting neighbors far greater than what we're seeing in the municipal supply. A homeowner is irrigating his lawn, pumping a lot of water, and the neighbor's only 200 feet away, and he's got his well, and his well is being adversely impaired. But I think the point that I want everybody to take away from this is that this is a rare state in that they are pushing hard to protect you. They are. I mean, this is not occurring in the majority of states in this country to identify, review, and predict the potential for adverse impairment. And so when I say that there are no requirements for off-site monitoring in most of the states we work in, that is absolutely the case. There are no requirements. New Hampshire has done its job in making this happen, and to monitor the number of wells we have during this process gives us a greater confidence level that it's going to be successful. And we've been doing this for 35 years, and this is one of the easier wells to be able to state that we don't see any adverse impacts coming through. So I know that doesn't mean much to you all, but it's the reality. The data is very strong.
Yes. Following up on that, you've been in the business for 35 years. How often have you told a client they shouldn't put a well in?
That many times. In fact, there are times when we have had situations where we've been asked to put a well in an area that's densely populated, and we've told them from the phase one. I showed you 6 phases. Phase one, don't pursue this. This is not something we should pursue.
Gentlemen, way back.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. First, you got focused on water. How about noise? There's been, during the testing, I heard nothing at all. When it starts pumping from the well to Larry Lane, will there be any noise from that?
You'll hear nothing at all.
Second thing, Kensington's being a good neighbor to Kensington, I mean to Exeter. I see Nico sitting there. What's the obligation for, if there's a problem with wells in Exeter, to tell the folks in Kensington or the town of Kensington, hey, we need to take a look at this, or we're working on it.
I don't fully understand your question. So if there is an observed problem with a private well in Exeter, let's say up on Groundwater Road,
On Groundwater.
what is the...
Is there an obligation to tell folks, and not the folks, but the town of Kensington, that, hey, we have a problem with the well, we're working on it?
Generally we don't make one town notify others when there's an issue in their town that doesn't appear to affect anybody in another town. I don't know. I mean, it's not like it's prohibited from copying
I just want to be
Kensington. I mean, part of this process, we are required to notify the entities around Lake Kensington of this permitting process. Once the permit's issued, if we encounter an issue, I suppose we can, if we wish, also CC the town on, let's say, if they need to monitor Mr. Tuttle's well, the town of Kensington.
I think that's a good legal policy.
Yes, sir.
So will we be notified when it goes online so we can monitor our wells?
Commonly, no. We don't normally have them notify everybody when a well goes online because, part of it is there's a phase into a lot of these big pieces of infrastructure. And when it's fully online is different than when it's turned on. And this project has in front of it a lot of work to do. It's a directional drilling project that has to happen under the river and poke up on the Larry Lane side of the project. That's no small effort, and it can only be done in certain seasons of the year, and it has to stay away from impacts for wetlands and surface. And then it's going to be keyed in. I think you noticed maybe in the table, this well has naturally occurring arsenic in it. It will have to be plumbed into the treatment plant. There's an arsenic treatment plant at Larry Lane, so that's no small effort. So it's a few years out, is my guess. Easy. Yes, Lady Mike?
In your testimony at the end, you talked about the well not as
the full universe of wells. When I say residential wells, I mean whether anybody has. Most of the residential wells that were monitored during these tests, not unlike most of the residential wells in this area of the state, are drilled rock wells. The average rock well depth in the state of New Hampshire is 425 to 450 feet. Maybe you know the depth of your well, maybe you don't. Depends on the year it was installed. Younger wells, you have a well construction report at the state, you can look up and see how old or how deep your well is. Usually bedrock wells have pumps in them hundreds of feet down, usually 20 to 30 to 50 feet off the bottom of the well. So there's a lot of water above the pump itself.
What about dug wells? Our well is only 60 feet.
Yep, so dug wells are a different story. There are not many drillers that install dug wells anymore. They generally are excavation wells, and the limits usually are based on the limit of an excavator reach, 14 feet to 16 feet max. Dug wells are much more susceptible to drought because there's less water in them, and that water is closer to the water table surface. This project did monitor it. This project did monitor shallow water levels in shallow soil, surface water, and wetlands, and there is no effect observed in any of them from pumping because of that big, thick clay layer, or about 80 feet of clay that sits above the sandy gravel.
But we haven't lost water in 48 years.
It's great, you're very lucky. I grew up in a house with a dug well, and my brother owns it and lives there today. And he's been lucky too, yes. It's been way
I
better.
have a question about the arsenic levels. Were the arsenic levels tested prior to the testing? As you said that they were elevated.
So,
I'm assuming that's after the testing was done and they require
During the
treatment.
testing. During the first, Dan, you can explain it, but it's the first day, it's the third day, fifth day.
Yeah, exactly. During the 5-day test sample, ours came together first. We have 3 samples, the first day, the third day, telling you that day. We do a full suite of all types of per state drinks. And so to go further back beyond that, we did a preliminary pumping test on the 8-inch well, which we reported at the last one. So we knew the arsenic was there 2 years ago.
Okay, so it's elevated to start with.
Yes, that was part of the consideration for whether you allow the same amount.
I think these are the numbers you're looking at right here, arsenic.
I'm sorry, I can't see that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just kind of blur. Here we go. But you mentioned in the last slide you have there, it was stated that the arsenic levels were elevated and needed to be treated.
So the state of New Hampshire's Drinking Water Act, our state drinking water standard is 5 parts per billion. And the federal state drinking water act is 10. New Hampshire a number of years ago adopted a lower standard. And these values range from 6.2 to 8. So it's just above the 5 parts per billion standard.
Is that right?
Making that better.
All right.
All right, so it seems like it's winding down. What this part of the agenda is about is preparing or taking a 5-minute break. We're going to set up the table over there. And we have a microphone. And this is the oral testimony part of the hearing, where we're going to open the hearing for oral testimony for anybody who wants to give testimony to the microphone, to the record, on the record. And then once everybody's done, whoever wants to give oral testimony to the record, we'll close that portion of the hearing, and Jared will open the hearing, part of this hearing, that we start the 45-day written testimony period, where anybody who wants to can write in a letter to us at these addresses and submit testimony about their thoughts about the process. And what I want to make sure everybody understands, when it comes to submitting testimony, anybody can submit and state anything to the record you want. The agency staff Jared's program, and I oversee this program and others. We only reply to testimony that is pertinent to the permitting process and the criteria and rules. We frequently, at hearings, get more written testimony about lots of things, about what people think about how groundwater should be dealt with in the state, and permits should come with prohibitions on any commercial connection to the water system. Lots of things we get for comments. We are only obligated, in fact, we only can respond to testimony we receive that's pertinent to the rules, the testing criteria, and the test data associated with the report that the town has. We won't be responding to all other elements that people bring up that are not related to the criteria related to large groundwater withdrawal. Okay?
So the oral testimony tonight and the written testimony, will you be equally?
Oh, yes.
Is there an advantage to saying something orally versus?
No, with written, you have more time to think through. If you haven't read the report, you can come into the town, read the report. So it's really up to you. There is no difference in our world. Testimony is testimony.
Thank you very much.
So we're going to take a 5-minute break, so after the minute starts, Jared will give you, and we'll go by on the business. Thank you.
meeting. Does anybody else want to provide oral testimony to the record tonight? If so, just put your name, address, and affiliation on a yellow index card, and you'll be called up and we'll be on the stage. Who we have. All right, so, sorry. All right, so the time is 7:49. We're going to open the oral testimony portion of the hearing.
Steve Schultz, if you'd like to present.
My name is Steve Schultz. I'm with Exeter Environmental Associates. We've been retained throughout this process by the town of Kensington to review the pump test report and consult and give some advice. And one of the things that I've been in discussions with the selectmen about is water quality. There's been a lot of discussion tonight on water quantity, and one of the things that we are hoping that can be taken care of is with regards to, I shouldn't say taken care of, that's the wrong way off. One of the things that I'd like to bring up in the public testimony is the issue of PFAS and bedrock groundwater. And at the Unitil site in 2019, PFAS was detected, I don't know, in the 200s of nanograms per liter. And that's just at the edge of the zone of contribution that's been mapped. And with groundwater flowing from that direction towards the production well, and there being some Kensington drilled wells in the same bedrock aquifer as the PFAS. The PFAS was detected in the drilled water supply well at the Unitil site. There's a concern that there could be some migration of the PFAS with the pumping. And so one of the things we'd like to see incorporated is monitoring of some residential wells for PFAS, and of course that would need to include a baseline round pre-pumping so that everyone has, not everyone, but so there's an idea of what the background PFAS would be. And I'm not sure how it would work with long-term monitoring, but whatever the program is for long-term monitoring, if there could be. And this would have to, of course, be dependent upon a given homeowner agreeing to have their wells tested. But that's what we'd like to see is some periodic monitoring of, say, a select, or I don't know what the number would be, but a representative number of bedrock homeowner wells to see if, just to keep track of PFAS in their water quality. Is that pretty much?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody else want to fill out a card and
Hey, Jules. Hey, Jules. Can you help me? Sometimes when I talk, my hand decides not, arm decides not.
Okay, so it is 7:53. We're going to close the oral testimony phase of this hearing. Jerry, do you want to cover the detail there about the opening in 2020?
What's that?
So you want to just touch base on...
Okay, so since the oral testimony closed today, therefore it'll be 45 days from today, which will be September 7th, 2020. If you want to provide written testimony, you can do it to our either email address, or you can send it to our office via PO Box 95 at 29 Hazen Drive in Concord, New Hampshire 03302. If you want to email your written comment, it'll be large, LARGEGW @des.nh.gov.
Okay. That's the end of the meeting. We can stay around for as long as anybody wants to answer questions. Do you have anything else for us? For Jared and I, I'm not going to obligate, obviously, anybody else to stay around.